Hello, St. John Baptist Church, Al McClaney with the weekly stewardship video. And what you're seeing here is a picture of taken outside of my car when I was out running errands on Saturday. And what struck me was the amount of cars in traffic. And see, you can see another one. I took a picture of Burlington and the shopping center over in that area. You can see cars, and went to the Parks Mall, cars. So what struck me is we're starting to come out of the crisis. It's slow, but people are out and about. Now, our area, the Texas area, is not necessarily reflective of the rest of the country, but we can see people are starting to move about. And there was a jobs report on September 4th, this past Friday, where they were saying that half of the 22 million jobs that had disappeared have now returned. We're now at 8.4% unemployment, which is still not good. That's a lot of people that are out of work, but it's better than the 15 or 16% that we were seeing in like May time frame. We still have a long way to go, but there's still positive moves, because before I had mentioned that the market was divergent from the economy, meaning market was just turning and burning going up, but the economy was lagging behind, which is actually pretty normal in a recession. The market tends to be a leading indicator of the economy. We're also getting positive news about a vaccine that conservatively, we could have one by spring of next year, in a more positive note by the end of the year. So all of these lead to the subject that I was looking at, being released from a shelter in place as people are starting to get out and about. And I wanted to use one of the first people we knew that had the shelter in place was Noah. And when he was told by God that there will be the rain and the flood occurring, he sheltered in place with his family. And so from Genesis 8:15 and 17, New Living Translation, one of the areas I would focus on, it says, as they saw ground and they saw that the water was receding, God gave them a command. And the last part of that scripture says, so they can be fruitful and multiply throughout the earth. So release all the animals, the birds, livestock, and the small animals that scurry along the ground, so they can be fruitful and multiply throughout the earth. Then you go to Genesis 9, verses 1 through 3. Then God blessed Noah and his sons and told them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. So I see this as they're being released from a shelter in place. And what are the directions that God gave them? Be fruitful and multiply. And that same direction and guidance can be seen being given to us today. So let's look at Joshua just before he was going into the promised land. And that's how I see as we're returning to more of a norm, even though the world as we know it will probably be permanently changed, just as we saw 9/11 permanent changes, but there are going to be differences in the way the economy operates now. Us people have seen that work from home is a viable option. Entire companies are saying we're going to do this permanently. So let's review God's instruction for entering the promised land that he gave Joshua. In Joshua 1 and 3, the Amplified Bible says, I have given you every place on which the sole of your foot treads, just as I promised Moses. Then you go to verses 7 and 8. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do everything in accordance with the entire law which Moses, my servant, commanded you. Then you go down to verse 8. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall read and meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything in accordance with all that's written. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will be successful. And several times I encourage you to go back and read all of Joshua 1. He says, be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. So from that, I'm looking at these two main guiding principles as we come out of our shelter in place. Be fruitful and multiply, and be strong and courageous. So I'll pose this question to you, and this will be a great time to talk about the disclaimer. No advice should be seen as a recommendation, as I am not a licensed financial advisor, and is for educational purposes only, because you may hear me mention a couple of stocks. So here's a question to pose to yourselves as we come out of shelter in place. What are some long-term investments slash business ideas as the economy recovers? So being fruitful and multiply, growing your investments for God's kingdom, starting a business, be strong and courageous. You'll need that to start a business. So could it be energy? That's a long-term play. How all of the refineries and the oil companies have been beaten up as people have not been driving as much. Well, that's going to change as people start to go back to norm. Airlines, we know, really been beaten up. But my wife was looking out the other day and saying, hey, there are inexpensive tickets to go to Hawaii. And we're looking at maybe next year in the spring to doing that. Again, that's a industry has been beaten up, but it could be a long-term investment. Tutoring as a business, a lot of people, a lot of parents have said, this is pretty rough to try to teach kids. And they need help. So maybe you want to start a tutoring business. Maybe anything associated with travel. Hotels now are starting to recover. Even Airbnbs, these are starting to recover. Telehealth. People are buying RVs, house projects. A lot of people doing the shelter in place were going to Lowe's and Home Depot, and they started to do projects around the house. Then I look at currencies and metals. If the economy all of a sudden snaps back, a lot of people run to gold or silver. And then we have elder and child care. All of these could be areas that could be long-term growth opportunities as investments or business ideas. So let's look at the earnings for this week as we transition into looking at the market itself. I have been saying, hey, earnings are starting to decrease as we move out of the peak earnings season, but there are some pretty interesting ones that are this week. The week of the 7th, because the market would be closed during Labor Day, so it's a shortened week. But this company, Slack, and what this company does, it has the tools and software for collaboration, sort of like Microsoft Teams. But this is a lot of companies been using their products as they have a lot of people working from home, and they're making a decision that they're going to permanently allow them to work from home. The other one is Restoration Hardware. This is a play into how Americans are starting to do a lot of work around their home, and this is an e-commerce play. So we saw other e-commerce stocks, Etsy, Amazon, all rising during this time. And then there are a couple of other ones. I will look at Peloton. That's that stay-home exercise equipment. It's been really growing as a stock. And then Kroger, as more people are eating at home, buying groceries versus going out to eat. Let's take a look at the market. So just what I said, okay, safe to go swimming outside. The economy is recovering. We did see some major selling on Friday of this week, which would have been September 4th, as we go into a long weekend. And this is the Standard & Poor 500. We always look at that in these different levels. Here's an interesting thing. We were at an all-time high. We had a lot of major selling starting on Thursday and really big on Friday. And you see it broke through what would be considered a 23.6% line. It could keep going to that 0% line. So we'll see next week is the selling continues, or will it hit this line and maybe bounce? And here's QQQ, which really got slammed hard. Tech was, out of all the laggers, was the leading lagger last week, where a lot of the companies got hit. Now, it could be because of this long run we've been having that it's taking a break and it's pulling back, and it may bounce. We'll see. This has broken through that 23.6% line. Also could go to zero line and bounce, or it may go down to 50%. We don't know. So we'll see a lot next week. So until then, think of these ideas. Think about Noah as he was getting ready to move out of his shelter in place. What kind of ideas do you see as long-term that may be profitable and may be going toward building God's kingdom? Because that money is in our hands as Christians.